In this video, I want to dive a little more practically into how you should read the Bible. I know a lot of people and are like, where do I start? What do I do? I read it, so what? So we want to try to give a little brief introduction to some helpful tips of how you should read the Bible. Now, again, you always want to know what kind of literature you're reading when you're reading the scriptures. If you're reading something poetic, you don't want to try to apply it literally. You're reading something literal, you don't want to try to take it poetically or interpret it in some far off way. So always knowing what type of literature you're reading is one of the most important places to start. The second thing is I always recommend starting with Jesus in the New Testament. If you haven't read the scriptures very much, you don't need to start in Genesis. You don't need to start in Samuel or Hosea. Start with Jesus. They're important, you're going to get there, but the main crux of the entire Christianity is with Jesus, so start with Jesus. Start with Jesus. I always recommend starting with Mark because it's the shortest of the Gospels and there's a lot of information that's taking place real quickly, a lot of action that's happening. So that's always my recommendation. James is perhaps the letter in the New Testament that I would read alongside of that because I think it's a great illustration of how to start living out the faith, living out the relationship with Jesus that you begin when you're reading the Gospels. So start with Jesus and try to get just 1 to 2 chapters. Again, we've also talked about translations. You want to make sure you're in a translation you can understand. My recommendation is to start with the New Living Translation, the NLT, and then have a plan and have a place. Do not go for Bible roulette. Do not just pick something and I want to read this today. Again, that's why I think you need to have, say, I'm going to start with Mark, or I'm going to start with James, I'm going to start with Matthew. Let me go through this entire book. Do not flip and expect God to do the hard work of trying to steer your thumb in the right way when it's much easier to go with a plan and have a place. What's realistic in your life to actually have time and energy to focus on reading the scriptures? Is it the last thing you're going to do before you go to bed and you end up going to worship at Bedside Baptist for the rest of the night and you think that you're going to learn the scriptures just because the ink has become a tattoo on the side of your face like a bad Mike Tyson situation? You actually want to do everything you can to try to make reading the scriptures one of the first things you do during the day, because it's going to set an orientation of your heart and your mind. It's sometimes when you have your best energy, or at least your first energy, right then and there. But be realistic about what works in your schedule. Are you somebody who's got a long commute and you want to put the Bible on audio and you can focus and listen while you're driving? Are you somebody who needs to be able to, you go to the gym first thing in the morning, so you sit in the parking lot at the gym and you don't allow yourself to go in before you've made sure you've read the scriptures? You go, I'm going to get up early, but it's actually the same time your kids get up as when you're getting up, and it never quite works out. Be realistic about what your schedule looks like and try to find a good place in this season of life that's going to give you 10, 15 minutes to really be able to read the scriptures over and over again. Now, while you're reading them, here's the first thing that I think you should be looking for. What does this passage teach me? And again, that might be a little broad, so let's break that phrase down a little bit. What are the commands or characteristics of God that I learn in this passage? Not every passage of Scripture has a clear command of do not kill, do not lie, do not commit adultery. Not everything has a clear command. When you get a clear command, that's a good one. You can evaluate yourself and say, am I doing that? Other times, you might be learning a characteristic about God, or a characteristic of the way God speaks about others, speaks about us, that we need to be able to see, because it's going to challenge the way we think. If you think God is someone who is afraid of your circumstances, but you see that he is a God who is always with you and never forsakes you, that might be a new characteristic that you've learned about him. You might think you have nothing special about yourself. You might think there's nothing important about you, but you read in Ephesians 4:16 that everyone has a special work to do. Now you've learned a new characteristic of the way that God thinks about you and has created you. So number one, what did I learn from this passage? Was there a command or characteristic that stood out to me? And the more and more you read the Bible, it may not be what did I learn brand new in this passage, but what did God illustrate? What did God challenge me with in this passage that is a command or a characteristic that I can pull from it? Now, once you've tried to figure out what have I learned from this, then you have to ask the question, what do I do with this information? What do I do differently because of this command or characteristic. So again, let's break this application down a little bit. Let's break this obedience down a little bit. Is there a behavior or a belief that you need to change? Is there a behavior or a belief that you need to change? Do not lie about your neighbor. And you're like, I love lying. That's one of my favorite things. So you've learned a command. It should change a behavior. Okay? Learn a command. It should change behavior. But you might also learn a characteristic. God has called me and has made me to do a special work. Everybody He's created to do a special work. So not only do I need to maybe change a belief system about myself and the way God's created me, I need to start changing some behaviors. I need to stop speaking so negatively about myself. I need to stop whining and complaining that I'm extra, I'm worthless, and God can't do anything with me, because I'm actually speaking against the way He's created me and the way that He's called me. So that's a real simplified, real helpful way. I'm hoping it's a real helpful way to think through when you're reading the scriptures. What did I learn and what should I do about it? What did I learn? Is there a belief or a behavior that I need to be able, I got confused there. What did I learn? Is there a command or a characteristic of God that is new or challenging to me? What am I going to do about it? Is there a behavior or a belief that I need to change as a result of what I've learned? So as you're spending time in the scriptures, it's not important to get through these massive chunks of scriptures as much it is to draw closer to God, to understand Him, understand how He's made you, and understand how you can show Him your love through your attitudes and actions.